Welcome to our training video on creating and maintaining agencies and program areas within WebGrants. We are going to discuss agencies first. Program areas are underneath agencies. I'm going to sign in, go to Utilities, and go to Agencies. And I'm just going to click on one as an example. So as you could see in my previous screen, there are multiple agencies and then many program areas underneath each agency. They're really easy to create. Just give it the agency name and then an abbreviated code for that. If you would have an integration process in your system, you can have this business unit. This is not necessary to create an agency. An agency is a separate department of your organization. A single WebGrants system can have a multi-agency implementation. This means that multiple separate departments can use a single instance of WebGrants. Hosted on one single server. Users can be assigned to one or more agencies and then programs underneath of those agencies. Users assigned to the agencies and programs work the same way, the program areas. You can only see that program and that agency's data, and the rest is all hidden from that user. So it all starts here with the agency. It's also important to note what I just talked about is a multi-agency implementation. You would also might have a small system that has one agency, so you may not see multiple agencies. It really just depends on the type of system setup that you have, but it can handle more than one agency. And it really, like I said, depends on the types of programs and the different agencies those programs belong to. So once your agencies are created, you can then go in and add program areas or manage your existing program areas. So I'm going to head there next. Utilities, program areas. In this case, I am only assigned to 3 programs. As you could see in the previous screen when I was in agencies, there are several programs in this particular system, but I am only assigned to these 3 that are showing on my screen. So these are the only programs I can manage. I'm going to give like a high-level overview of what program area actually means. Program area is a concept in the WebGrants system that determines the current grant type. Grant-making organizations typically give away more than one type of grant. Each of these types would be a program area. With the exception of people and organizations, all the documents in the WebGrants system are associated with a program area. Program areas are associated with all the activity in the system. So it's not possible to create an application, a grant, a status report, or any other document without first stating its program area. Then, all forms developed in the Form Creator tool are developed on a program area basis. There are global forms, but this just means they are associated with all program areas. Another important note here is that you can't delete a program area once it's been added because of all the associations with the program area. It does not allow a delete. So these should truly be added only by administrators of the system. And now I'm going to take you into the settings of a program area. I'm going to just click on one of these. So you can see you name the program area, give it an abbreviated code, and then this is where you'll associate the program with the agency. And again, you might have just one agency in your system, or you may have many. I want to go into the program area properties here. These properties here, they can be changed per program, and they're really nice. And it's important to understand what these properties do. First, we see the claim properties. This really depends on the rules that are specified for your program, but it really goes down to allowing your grantee to go over not their entire budget, but their like line items within their budget. The system is not going to let them claim above their true awarded amount of their total budget. but they can be very strict where they can't move funds across budget lines. So if we just throw out some categories, some pretty standard categories in a budget, typically you'll see something like personnel, fringe benefits, travel, supplies, equipment, and maybe an other category. So if you have a total budget, we'll throw out another example of 20,000, can they move, as long as they don't go over that 20,000, can they move the funds across those lines within a certain percentage? Like a lot of programs I hear will say, yes, they can move, they can have some movement within their budget up to 10%. If it's over 10%, it requires an amendment. But anything under 10%, they can move around. And then I have other programs say, no, if they need to move it around, they have to submit an amendment. Well, this is how you can control it so that they can or can't do whatever that rule is for this particular program. So if you want to enable this, you can say yes, and then you can say per line item or per total budget. Again, it's never going to let them go over their total budget, but what this means is it's never going to go back and look at the categories. So if you have multiple line items under equipment, equipment would be your category. And then if you set it to per line item, however many items they have listed under equipment, they could move the funds as long as it stays within equipment. But they couldn't move equipment money up to supplies or to salary. So if you wanted them to be able to move all around, that's where you go total budget. But again, the total awarded amount, they're never going to be able to claim over unless you would truly do like an amendment and increase that budget for them. So I can say yes, and then choose which option, and then I set a percentage. So percent claim line item allows to exceed. So the typical I see if movement is allowed is typically 10%. You can say no, 0, no, and they will be limited to the exact budget you approved. So again, it depends on the program's rules. And that's the beauty of this is you can do it per program because every program is unique. So you can have multiple programs on the system that all run a little bit differently. But this is how that's controlled. These two properties seem pretty similar, but they're quite different. Hide zero value budget lines on a claim. If you have an entire budget, now again, I'm going to use the pretty standard budget, personnel, fringe, supplies, equipment, those typical categories. If you would have a grantee that maybe didn't have supplies in their budget and you disable or hide, they're two totally different things. So hiding it means they won't see it at all on the claim. Now keep in mind, if you're hiding it, but you've set it to where yes, they can move. So let's say we've got it set like this where yes, we can move per category, but then we turn around and hide the 0. That means they couldn't take the money from equipment and put it into supplies because they didn't have any supplies on their budget. So again, you want to really think about this. If you let them move their money around, you're probably going to want to show them the 0 amounts. So most of the time you don't hide them completely. You show them the entire budget. And again, this is just a majority. It doesn't mean that's what you fit into. So I'm going to say no, but disable. Maybe you want to disable so they can see that their supplies is on the budget, but it's 0. So you disable entry. Now, if I have a rule like this, though, where they can really move it per total budget, and they can just move it anywhere as long as they don't go over their awarded amount, then I probably don't want to disable 0. I would probably say go ahead and let them see that supplies for 0, and as long as they have funds remaining in their budget, they could claim against supplies. But again, that's up to you on how you have to track the budget and the claim. It's very specific to each program. And again, further than this, you have multiple funding opportunities under each program. So this is the highest, level. The program controls the rules for all those funding opportunities. So you want to think about all your funding opportunities when you're doing this. I'm going to go ahead and say yes, disable. And then I always like to show the subtotals for the claim line items. That's just really nice. But if you have a pretty simple budget, you don't need to do that. This is when you have a pretty large budget and you want to show the subtotals at the bottom. Then you can show additional claim columns. You don't have to, but there are certain columns that are helpful because the total paid amount, truly, when you're looking at a claim listing, that is just total paid. So if you have a couple maybe out there that are submitted or they're sitting and approved, they haven't actually made it to that paid status yet. If you set this to yes and actually show those additional columns, it will show you those other statuses sitting out there. So you can see the balances like submitted but haven't been paid yet. So it totals up to how much is left or remaining. And then if you want to limit your claim submission period, I actually do not see this used very much because there's a lot of exceptions. So you may say, well, we want to limit it to 1 claim per month, but it is very restrictive when you do this. And if there would be an exception where you would allow a grantee to maybe they missed January and would submit 2 in February, they wouldn't be able to because you're limiting it to 1 a month in this case. So you really have to think about the exceptions here and what you would allow. And again, it goes to all funding opportunities, which means all those grants under every funding opportunity underneath this program. So this gets very strict. These you don't have to do, but they're handy if you do have a specific format for the actual ID of your applications or grants. And if I see these used, it's mostly your grant ones. The system will generate a unique ID for all the applications and grants in the system. Now, once you get into the grant, a lot of clients will update that system generated ID to their own format. Usually it's their contract number once that contract number has been created. You know, most grants under that year will be like the same pre and post text. If we have a grant number 55 that's a system generated ID and it's number 55, I can put pre and post text so when I award my grants into grant tracking. The beginning can maybe say the program name and the end could maybe say the year. You'd have to come in and update this program setting each year, but it's really handy so you're not doing it manually on each grant. So this is education. So it could look something like, we'll say ed, and then I'll put a dash, and then we could go dash whatever the year is. And then what'll happen is that grant number 55, when I award it, it would have been application number 55. And then I award it into grant tracking. If I have a pre and post text, instead of it just being grant number 55, it would be grant number ED/55/FY23. And all of my grants awarded would get that format. And then I could just come in here and update it each year before I award grants. Again, this is not something you have to do, but if you have that common pre or post text or both, it's nice and handy to do it in here. You can also do the same thing with your applications. So when they're automatically generated, they'll have that pre and post text. The claim properties, I would say, are the most important in here to understand. And the best way to really get a picture of this and to visualize and see what you need for your particular program is take a good test. We're always stressing, take a good test and test it all the way through the life cycle. We'll take that good test grant, create a claim, and change these properties a little bit. Make sure you have a decent budget that you're testing with. Go create a claim, toggle back, maybe don't disable and see what that does. See how you can now enter data for a 0 claim and so on, and work with it here so you really know. And again, it would be for all the grants underneath this program. This concludes our video on the program areas and agencies. Thank you for watching.